Welcome to the 1+1 channel. The joint marathon continues. I'm Solomia Wittwicka and this is TSN. Today, the air raid alert in the capital lasted 10.5 hours. Since midnight, the Russians have attacked the capital with Shaheds, ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. The consequences of the attack were recorded in 7 districts of Kyiv. In the Sviatoshinsky district, the body of a man was recovered from under the rubble. There, debris set the building's facade on fire across several floors. An apartment building is burning in the Dnipro district. In the Obolonsky and Solomiansky districts, high-rise and private houses, as well as dozens of cars, were damaged. In Darnitsia, a 9-story building caught fire due to falling debris, and a person also died there. Currently, it is known that 16 people have been injured in the city, including 1 child. Requests from medical personnel continue to come in. In addition to the capital, rescuers are extinguishing fires in the Brovasky and Fastivsky districts of the Kyiv region. Rescuers warn that the enemy often carries out repeated strikes, so they urge people to respond to all air raid alerts. The Russians attacked Khmelnytskyi region with Kinzhal missiles. There were no casualties. Slavutish in the Kyiv region was left without power as a result of the evening attack. Explosions were also heard late in the evening in Dnipro. Enemy Shaheds were flying there. An infrastructure facility was damaged in the Dnipro district. In Pavlograd district, the enemy injured an elderly woman and damaged 6 houses, a gas pipeline, and power lines. In Kherson region, a 50-year-old driver died in the hospital. He was injured as a result of a Russian drone strike on a civilian car. Doctors are also fighting for the life of his severely injured passenger. Another woman was hospitalized in Kherson. She was wounded in her own home. Due to Russian shelling in the Kharkiv region, a man was killed in the village of Shestakove and 2 women were injured. Another man was killed in the village of Karaikne. In Kharkiv, guided aerial bombs damaged 2 apartment buildings, an administrative building, and a car. The Chuhuiv district also suffered destruction. Zaporizhzhia endured more than 300 Russian attacks. Civilians were targeted with aircraft, artillery, and drones. Law enforcement received 70 reports of damage to people's homes and property. The enemy has made gains near Rivnopil and Huliaipole. The occupiers are trying to advance as much as possible in the Zaporizhzhia region and are almost continuously assaulting Ukrainian positions, according to the analytical portal Deep State. Fierce fighting is taking place in Pokrovsk. Ukrainian soldiers are clearing the northern outskirts of the city of enemy saboteurs. Special operations forces have shown how they set up ambushes along the routes used by the Russians. The enemy tried to take up positions in one of the apartment buildings, but 3 Russians were eliminated as they approached the shelter. A 4th tried to escape and shoot down the Ukrainian reconnaissance drone with small arms, but the occupier was found and neutralized. Our successes in the northern part of Pokrovsk have halted the enemy's advance toward Ryshain. However, the Russians continue to tighten the encirclement of Mironohrad. There have already been recorded attempts by isolated enemy groups to infiltrate the city, but so far they have been unsuccessful. And we have also managed to stabilize the situation around Huliaipole, which the enemy is also trying to occupy. Vovchansk is holding on as well. The Russians have repeatedly reported the capture of the city. After a year and a half of relentless attacks, Russian terrorists have turned the city into ruins. No factories, no hospitals, no apartment buildings remain. The fighters of the 57th Brigade and adjacent units are holding their positions. In total, 247 combat engagements were recorded over the past night. Andriy Yermak, who is heading to the front and ready for any reprisals, commented on his resignation from the position of head of the president's office. He told journalists from the New York Post that he had been disgraced and his dignity was not protected, despite the fact that he had been in Kyiv since February 24, 2022. Yermak stated that he does not want to create problems for Zelensky, so he is going to the front. However, he did not specify which unit he would join or when he would depart for the combat zone. The president announced the personnel changes in his address. He thanked Andriy Yermak for his patriotic stance during the negotiation process and also emphasized that he would hold consultations regarding his successor today. He also announced a reboot not only in the office but also in the law enforcement and military systems.
The head of the office, Andriy Yermak, has submitted his resignation. I am grateful to Andriy for always representing the Ukrainian position in the negotiation track exactly as it should be. It has always been a patriotic position, but I want there to be no rumors or speculation. As for the new and important head of the office, tomorrow I will indeed hold extensive consultations with those individuals who could potentially lead this significant institution.
The resignation of Andriy Yermak, which became known the previous evening, was preceded by searches conducted at the official's home by NABU and SAP. At that time, Andriy Yermak was still heading the presidential office. How the world reacted to Yermak's dismissal and who will become his successor, watch more in the following report.
Andriy Yermak held the position of head of the presidential office longer than any of his predecessors in the country's history, almost 6 years. During this time, he became a source of irritation for many within the country, and from time to time there were calls for his dismissal. However, from the very beginning, Zelensky was unwavering in his trust.
A truly dedicated patriot of Ukraine who consistently works incredibly hard, 24/7, solely and completely for the profound sake of Ukraine. He arrived with me, and he will certainly depart with me.
Andriy Yermak was constantly by the president's side during the first days of the full-scale invasion.
The head of the president's office is here. Prime Minister Shmyhal is here.
After the decree on dismissal was made public, the president thanked Yermak for his patriotic stance during the negotiation process, but added that he agreed to dismiss him in order to avoid rumors and speculation.
The head of the office, Andriy Yermak, submitted his resignation letter. I am grateful to Andriy for always representing the Ukrainian position in the negotiation track exactly as it should be. It has always been a patriotic position, but I want there to be no rumors or speculation. As for the new head of the office, tomorrow I will hold consultations with those who could lead this institution.
The resignation was preceded by searches conducted by NABU and SAP at Andriy Yermak's home. According to media reports, the searches were part of Operation Midas, which concerns corruption in the energy sector. At the beginning of November, NABU released recordings of conversations between the suspects who used codenames Rocket, Tenor, Sugarman, Carlson, and Ryoshik. Their real surnames later became known. It is suspected that businessmen Timur Mindich and Alexander Sukerman, who have both left Ukraine and are now wanted, were involved in the case, among others. But on the so-called Mindich tapes, there was one person with the nickname Ali Baba, who was giving instructions to law enforcement agencies regarding attacks on NABU and SAP. Who is he? The anti-corruption agencies have not admitted it yet, but there are rumors that this pseudonym allegedly referred to the head of the president's office. The first reaction to the morning raids from European politicians came even before Yermak's resignation. The chief spokesperson of the European Commission, Paula Pinho, stated that searches of officials at such a high level indicate that the anti-corruption agencies are indeed working. Another spokesperson for the European Commission, Guillaume Marseille, emphasized that the fight against corruption is key for Ukraine's accession to the EU. American Congressman and Donald Trump critic Don Bacon commented optimistically on the news about the search of Yermak.
Ukraine has independent law enforcement agencies and a judicial system. Russia does not have this. There, people are thrown out of high-rise windows.
Andriy Yermak was a key negotiator for Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky stated that, following Yermak's dismissal, Ukraine will be represented in peace agreement negotiations with the US by the Chief of the General Staff, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, as well as officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Intelligence Services. American analyst David Kramer suggested on the telethon that removing Yermak from the negotiating team would not have a negative impact on consultations with the US regarding a possible peace agreement, since, according to him, the corruption scandal had the effect of a thundercloud and undermined the entire negotiation process.
Today's resignation has long been expected. It was bound to happen. And in fact, this significant development will undoubtedly help to effectively remove the dark cloud that has been persistently hanging over the entire negotiation process and the president's current administration for a considerably extended period of time. However, I would not want to prematurely suggest or assert that this particular situation will ultimately result in an entirely and completely positive outcome for all parties involved. I fully understand and acknowledge that this specific action or event could potentially become an integral part of the broader Russian narrative. I strongly believe that they will actively try to push and promote the pervasive idea within the United States that Ukraine is hopelessly and irrevocably bogged down in this protracted and difficult conflict. But I believe that, on the contrary, Ukraine is fulfilling its promises to fight corruption.
Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that the president's office is now expecting a personnel overhaul. Political analysts are already competing with their own guesses as to who will become the next head.
I've already heard suggestions that a military person might become the head of the president's office. Well, we have the Institute of Military Administrations in the frontline regions, and here, in the context of war, with the current escalation of the military situation and the negotiation process, well, it would seem logical. If a person has experience in both civilian administration and military management, then I think such an option could also be considered. Today, it seems we will have to come to the point where greater responsibility for the internal agenda, for example, should be borne by the cabinet of ministers and parliament, right? At the same time, the head of the office, after consultations and once appointed, should be responsible for ensuring that the president remains up to date on matters such as discussions with partners, negotiations within the framework of the negotiation process, possibly negotiations with the Russians, and so on and so forth.
Officially, Andriy Yermak is not a subject in the criminal case that led to his resignation. After the searches, Yermak was not served with a notice of suspicion. Valentina Dobrota, TSN 1+1, Marathon, United News.
The head of the main intelligence directorate, Kirill Budanov, is heading to the United States for negotiations. This is reported by a journalist from The Economist who suggests that the general may lead the Ukrainian delegation. Until recently, Andriy Yermak was almost the main negotiator with the United States, but now he will be replaced in this area by NSDC Secretary Rustem Umarov, Chief of the General Staff Andriy Khnatov, and representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the main intelligence directorate. In the coming days, Kyiv is expecting the U.S. Army Minister Dan Driscoll for the final coordination of the peace plan. One of the most problematic issues is the so-called territorial exchange, specifically the demand to hand over the non-occupied part of Donetsk region to Russia. This week, Donald Trump once again returned to the idea that in a few months Russia will be able to seize these lands, so it would be better to exchange them without a fight. Voluntarily leaving one's own territories is that red line, the very red line that the president of Ukraine has promised never to cross. The Telegraph writes, next week, Trump's special envoy Stephen Biegun and the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner will travel to Moscow. According to the publication, the Americans will bring Putin a proposal: official recognition by the United States of the occupied territories, including Crimea, in exchange for a peace agreement. He acted without a European mandate. The German Chancellor criticized Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán for his visit to Moscow. Friedrich Merz emphasized that his Hungarian counterpart acted without consulting the EU. Orbán himself wrote on social media that Budapest got what it wanted from Moscow: oil and gas supplies, as well as the continuation of the construction of the nuclear power plant. At the same time, the media note that the atmosphere of the negotiations was chilly. This is already the 14th meeting between Orbán and Putin. They discussed the possibility of holding a summit between the Kremlin leader and the US president in Budapest. Talks that never began due to Moscow's excessive demands for ending the war in Ukraine. Viktor Orbán, who is already facing new elections in April, is counting heavily on the fact that holding this summit will help boost his ratings. After all, according to forecasts, he could lose for the first time in a decade and a half. It will harm the peace agreement. Belgium has found a new reason to block the EU's plan to transfer Russian assets to Ukraine. The country's Prime Minister Bart de Wever sent a letter with the relevant arguments to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. In the document, the politician warned that the hasty adoption of the loan scheme for reparations could have side effects. The EU would, in effect, block the path to a potential peace agreement. According to de Wever, this scheme is fundamentally wrong, because historically, frozen assets have never been used during wartime. Usually, decisions regarding them were made after the war as part of reparations from the losing side. Currently, about 185 billion in Russian assets are frozen in Belgium, of which 140 billion are planned to be transferred to Ukraine. Discussions about the transfer have been ongoing since October. However, the leaders have still not managed to reach an agreement. Official Brussels is concerned about financial and legal risks. They say that the Kremlin could later prosecute them for this. That is why they are asking for guarantees from other EU members. Meanwhile, Politico, citing its own sources, reports that the Belgian government is allegedly withholding full information about Russian assets and is using them for tax revenues in its own budget. And this is a violation of an international obligation that requires them to disclose information about what they are doing with these funds. In an exclusive interview for TSN, the head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, said that they are preparing a legal proposal to reassure the Belgian authorities and allow the use of Russian assets next year. The final approval is expected at the EU summit on December 18th through 19th. Work on the loan for reparations is ongoing. The Commission has proposed a document with options that included different approaches. But undoubtedly, the loan for reparations is the most viable option. in order to move forward and actually fund the needs that Ukraine has. Of course, this requires thorough work at the legislative level to truly resolve all legal issues and risks, as well as ensuring that Belgium, which is the largest holder of these assets, can cover the risks and receives collective support in their distribution. Another peace initiative from Donald Trump. Next week, the presidents of Congo and Rwanda will visit the White House. They are expected to sign a peace agreement after 30 years of war. The draft of this agreement, brokered by the U.S., was already signed by the country's top diplomats back in June. The document specifically provided for the withdrawal of Rwandan troops from the eastern part of Congo. It is there that the M23 rebel group, supported by Rwanda, operates. Over the past year, the rebels have managed to capture several major cities. As a result, thousands have been killed. At present, the countries have agreed on specific security measures, which are to be implemented by the end of the year, as well as on regional economic cooperation. The United States is acting as a mediator in this process, and the U.S. president views the suspension of the conflict between Congo and Rwanda as yet another war he has ended. The press has repeatedly written about Donald Trump's strong desire to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. This year, he wasn't nominated in time, but it seems the American leader hasn't lost hope for a medal next year. Powerful explosions in Russia. Friendly drones have returned to the Afipsky oil refinery. The large fire broke out there. According to reports, the fire covered an area of 250 square meters. The Afipsky oil refinery is one of the largest in the aggressor country. It is located in the south. Drones attacked it in September and August. Russian media are also reporting damage from drones in Taganrog and Volgograd. Overall, officials from the aggressor country claim they shot down 103 Ukrainian drones, both over their own territory and over annexed Crimea. An apocalyptic explosion near Russia's Orenburg. There was a bright explosion there, not far from the Cosmodrome and a missile forces base. In footage captured by eyewitnesses, you can see an unknown object, likely a missile, burning and exploding. A huge column of purple smoke forms at the site, somewhat resembling a mushroom cloud. However, the Russian authorities are in no hurry to evacuate the local residents. From near Orenburg, the Russians launched long-range missiles, including carriers of nuclear warheads. In total, the aggressor country still has 11 such sites. Russian space technologies have also gone down the drain. At Baikonur, the launch pad for spacecraft was destroyed. This is the only place where, since Soviet times, manned missions to the International Space Station have been launched. Everything happened at the moment of the launch of the Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft. For unknown reasons, the service cabin collapsed there. This structure fell onto the launch pad. Roscosmos confirmed the incident and reported that after the launch of the spacecraft, the launch pad was damaged and will be restored in the near future. Although some experts say that, in fact, from this day on, Russia has lost the ability to send people into space, something that hasn't happened since 1961. What was used to attack the tankers of Russia's shadow fleet in Turkey? Several media outlets report that underwater drones may have been the cause of the explosions on 2 ships involved in the business of the aggressor country. This conclusion is drawn from what is allegedly a fragment of the crew's call for help. The first tanker exploded in the Bosphorus. Officially, the vessel sails under the flag of the African country of Gambia. It was heading to the port of Novorossiysk when the explosion occurred. After that, a fire broke out in the tanker's engine room and Turkish rescuers had to evacuate 25 crew members. The Coast Guard was also working at the scene of the incident. According to reports, the tanker may sink. This ship is believed to be part of Russia's shadow fleet and is under sanctions. Meanwhile, a fire broke out on a second oil tanker off the coast of Turkey.